"You people always smile like that," the man said, leaning back in his chair as if the entire restaurant belonged to him. That quiet little smile, like you're trained not to make real noise. He tapped his glass slowly, staring at the woman standing beside the table. "You know what you remind me of?" he continued, voice dripping with mock amusement. "One of those service robots they build now. Push the button. It brings food. Smile programmed in. Personality optional." A few guests at the table chuckled. "But at least robots don't expect tips," he added coldly. "So, tell me something. Why do people like you always think you deserve one?" The restaurant went silent around them. The dining room of Vanderlynn Steakhouse glittered with polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Manhattan's most powerful investors filled the tables, celebrating what the business pages were already calling the deal of the year. Standing beside table 17 was Maya Carter, a 34-year-old black woman, warm brown skin, tired eyes that carried the weight of sleepless nights and early mornings. She wore the simple black uniform of the restaurant, hair pulled back neatly, posture calm and professional. But Maya Carter wasn't just a waitress. She was a widowed mother raising 3 young children alone, and tonight she was trying to survive another shift. Across the table sat Edward Whitmore, 58 years old, tall, silver-haired, pale skin polished with the confidence of generational wealth. Founder and CEO of Whitmore Global, a multinational logistics empire worth billions. Beside him was his wife, Charlotte Whitmore, 52, elegant and icy, her diamond bracelet flashing under the chandelier light. The table was full of executives, investors, and lobbyists, people used to commanding rooms. Edward slowly picked up the leather check folder Maya had placed on the table. He opened it. Then he smiled. "Well, he said loudly enough for the table to hear. Service was acceptable." A guest laughed. Another leaned forward, curious. Edward pulled out a pen. "Let's see what the tip should be." Charlotte leaned over his shoulder. "Oh, Edward, don't start," she said lightly. But the smirk on her face suggested the opposite. Edward scribbled something on the receipt. Then he folded it once and slid it across the table toward Maya. "Here you go," he said casually. "Your reward." Maya reached down and picked up the receipt. For a moment, she simply stared at the ink. Then the words settled in. "We don't tip black people." The laughter came instantly. Not loud, but loud enough. One of the younger investors whispered, "Jesus." Another guest quietly raised his phone under the table. "Recording." Charlotte gave a small shrug. "Well," she said coolly, "at least we're honest." The restaurant manager, Daniel Green, hurried toward the table, panic already spreading across his face. "Mr. Whitmore, everything all right here?" he asked nervously. Edward leaned back again. "Perfectly fine." He gestured lazily toward Maya. "Your waitress here seems confused." Daniel glanced at the receipt in Maya's hand. His face tightened. "Maya," he whispered urgently, "just ignore it. Take the bill and move on." At the table, a man in a navy suit chuckled. "You should be grateful," he said to Maya. "At least he didn't ask you to clean the floor, too." More laughter. Another guest muttered just loud enough to be heard, "Some people should remember their place." The words hung in the air like smoke. Maya stood still. Her fingers tightened around the receipt. Inside her chest, something old stirred, something she had buried for years. Edward watched her carefully, waiting, expecting anger, expecting tears, expecting a scene, because scenes were easy to dismiss. But Maya Carter didn't give him one. Instead, she calmly folded the receipt once more. Then she slipped it quietly into the small pocket of her apron. Edward frowned slightly. That wasn't the reaction he wanted. "You're not going to say anything?" he asked. Maya finally looked at him directly. For the first time, her eyes really studied his face, the sharp nose, the silver hair, the cold confidence, and suddenly something inside her memory clicked into place. A name, a company, a photograph she had seen years ago in a report her husband once brought home. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, sir." She turned to leave. Edward scoffed. "See?" he said to the table. "Programmed politeness." The guests laughed again, but Maya had already taken 2 steps away when she stopped, not because of the insult, because of the realization spreading slowly through her mind. Whitmore Global. 7 years ago, her husband's final case. Maya slowly reached into her apron pocket again. She unfolded the receipt just enough to look at Edward Whitmore's signature. Then she whispered under her breath, "So it was you." Her heart began to pound, because suddenly the humiliation didn't feel random anymore. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Psalm 9:9. If you have ever watched someone humiliate another person because they thought they had power, then what happens next with Maya Carter will make you rethink everything about justice. Don't forget to like and subscribe and stay with Black Resilient Stories to follow this story. Because the man who wrote that racist message on a receipt has no idea he just handed Maya the first piece of evidence that could destroy his empire. Overnight, the video of that receipt will spread across the internet. And when Whitmore Global's lawyers and PR machine arrive to bury the story, they will discover something terrifying. Maya Carter didn't just keep the receipt. She recognized the name written on it. By sunrise, the receipt had already circled the internet. 9 seconds of video. That was all it took. A shaky phone recording showed Maya standing beside table 17 while the camera zoomed in on the bill. Then the words appeared on the screen. "We don't tip black people." The clip ended there, but the damage didn't. Inside the small kitchen office of Vanderlynn Steakhouse, 3 televisions played the video over and over. News anchors talked over each other. The viral clip has already reached millions of views. Whitmore Global has issued a statement denying the authenticity of the message. Sources close to the company claim the waitress may have fabricated the incident. Maya sat quietly at the desk. Her apron was still folded on her lap. Inside the pocket was the receipt. Across the room, Daniel Green paced like a man watching his building burn. "This is bad," he muttered. One of the televisions switched to financial news. Whitmore Global shares dipped 2% in early trading following the viral video. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at Maya. "You didn't talk to any reporters, right?" "No." "You didn't post anything online?" "No." Daniel exhaled heavily. "Good, because lawyers are already involved." He pointed toward the television. "They're saying the video is edited." Maya slowly removed the receipt from her apron. The ink was still dark, still visible, still real. "Then they can look at it," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "You're not listening." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They're not trying to prove the video is fake." He swallowed. "They're trying to make you look crazy." Outside, 2 black SUVs rolled up to the restaurant entrance. The doors opened. Whitmore Global's response team stepped out. Inside the dining room, everything suddenly moved. Faster. Employees were called away from their stations. Phones were collected. Security footage was requested. The atmosphere shifted from restaurant service to corporate lockdown. Lauren Pierce stood in the center of the empty dining room, watching the operation unfold. "Step 1, she said calmly. "Contain the narrative." A lawyer checked his tablet. "Video is at 11 million views." Lauren didn't react. "Then we accelerate." She turned toward Marcus. "Collect any staff recordings." Marcus nodded and began moving through the restaurant. Within minutes, employees were quietly separated into rooms for statements. A host handed over her phone. A bartender was asked to describe exactly what he heard. Every detail was being documented, not to protect the truth, to control it. Back in the office, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and stiffened. "Whitmore Legal," he whispered. He stepped into the hallway to answer. Now but the office door closed behind him. For a moment, Maya was alone. The televisions continued repeating the same footage. Whitmore Global denies allegations. Company representatives suggest the message may have been added later. A spokesperson says legal action is possible. The office door opened again. Lauren stepped inside. She closed the door gently behind her. For a moment, she simply looked at Maya. Not angry, just curious. "So," she said softly, "you're the waitress." Maya didn't move. Lauren pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Let me ask you something." Her tone was calm, almost friendly. "Did you write that message yourself?" "No." Lauren nodded slowly, as if considering the answer. You understand defamation law is extremely serious. The receipt is real, Maya replied. Lauren shrugged. That's not what matters. She leaned forward slightly. What matters is what people believe. Silence filled the room. Lauren continued. Right now, the story online is simple. She raised one finger. Cruel billionaire humiliates waitress. She raised another. But narratives are fragile things. Her voice lowered. With the right pressure, they change. Maya said nothing. Lauren studied her carefully. Imagine tomorrow's headline. She spoke slowly. Waitress fabricates racism stunt for money. She leaned back, and suddenly everything looks very different. Maya held the receipt tightly in her hand. Lauren stood. One more thing, she said casually. Mr. Whitmore will be signing a $9 billion defense contract in 72 hours. She walked toward the door. So, whatever attention you're enjoying right now, her hand rested on the handle, it will disappear very quickly. Lauren opened the door. And so will you. The door closed. The office fell silent, again. Only the televisions continued speaking. Maya slowly unfolded the receipt. Her eyes moved across Whitmore's signature. Then she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Next to the signature was a scribbled number. 4 digits, small, almost careless. Maya frowned. Something about it felt familiar. She reached into her bag and pulled out the worn notebook she kept hidden there. David's notebook. The pages were filled with account numbers, dates, and short notes written in his tight handwriting. She flipped through until she reached the page she remembered. Rows of offshore account numbers, one of them circled, highlighted. She looked back at the receipt, then back at the notebook. The numbers matched. Exactly. Beside the number in David's handwriting were 2 words. Untouchable account. Maya felt a chill run through her spine. She whispered quietly to herself, "What did you just reveal, Edward?" Because if Whitmore had casually written down the same number David once flagged, then the humiliation at the restaurant wasn't the real story. The real story was the secret David died trying to expose. The attack came faster than Maya expected. By midday, the story had already begun to change. Not disappear, change. On the television mounted in the restaurant break room, the same video that once sparked outrage was now being replayed under a very different headline. Waitress accused of staging racism incident. Maya stood near the doorway watching the broadcast. Whitmore Global representatives claim the viral video may have been manipulated, the news anchor reported. Sources close to the company suggest the waitress involved may have fabricated the message to gain attention or financial compensation. A panelist laughed softly. It wouldn't be the first time someone tried to exploit a situation like this. Another voice chimed in. Exactly. People need to wait for the full story. The screen switched to a corporate spokesperson standing behind a polished podium. We take allegations of discrimination seriously, the man said smoothly. But we must also protect our employees and leadership from false accusations. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. They weren't denying the insult anymore. They were rewriting it. In the hallway behind her, Daniel Green approached slowly. His face looked worse than it had that morning. Maya? We need to talk. She turned. Daniel avoided her eyes. The owner called. She already knew what was coming. We've been threatened with legal action, he continued. Whitmore Global's lawyers say the restaurant could be liable for defamation if this situation escalates. Maya's voice was steady. So? Daniel rubbed his forehead. So, they want to distance the restaurant from the incident. Silence stretched between them. Then he finally said it. We're suspending you, effective immediately. The words hung in the air. Suspending, Maya repeated quietly. For now, Daniel said quickly. Until everything clears up. Maya looked toward the televisions again. Another report had started. New information has surfaced regarding the waitress's husband, who previously worked at Whitmore Global. Her heart skipped. Daniel noticed. Maya, you should probably sit down. But she didn't. She kept watching. The screen now showed an image pulled from an old corporate photo. David Carter, her husband. The headline beneath the picture read, "Former Whitmore accountant linked to internal investigation before death." The anchor continued speaking. Documents suggest David Carter was under review for financial misconduct before his fatal car accident 7 years ago. The room felt suddenly smaller. Sources claim the investigation may explain why the waitress is now targeting Whitmore Global. Daniel cursed quietly under his breath. "That's low," he muttered. But Maya barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on the screen. They were destroying David. Turning the man, who died trying to expose them into a criminal. And they were doing it publicly, on every channel. Across the city, inside a glass-walled office tower, Edward Whitmore watched the same broadcast from his executive boardroom. Several executives sat around the table. Lauren Pierce stood near the window scrolling through headlines on her tablet. "The narrative shift is working," she said calmly. Edward smiled. "Of course it is." He leaned back in his chair. "Public outrage is fragile. You just give people another villain." A younger executive hesitated. "Sir, what if she produces the receipt?" Edward waved a hand dismissively. "Paper proves nothing." He glanced at Lauren. "How long until the new story fully replaces the old one?" Lauren checked the trending metrics on her screen. "Another 6 hours." Edward nodded. "Good." He stood and walked toward the window overlooking Manhattan. "In 72 hours, we finalize the defense contract." His voice hardened. "And by then, no one will remember her name." But they were wrong about one thing. Maya Carter remembered everything. That evening, she sat alone at her kitchen table. Her children were asleep upstairs. The small apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. David's notebook lay open in front of her. The offshore account number from the receipt stared back from the page. She flipped to another section. Dates, transfers, notes written in David's handwriting. One entry was circled heavily. "WG, Untouchable Pipeline," Maya whispered softly. "What were you trying to show me, David?" The answer wasn't here yet, just fragments. Pieces of a machine she couldn't fully see. But she understood one thing now. Whitmore wasn't just protecting his reputation. He was protecting something far bigger. Her phone buzzed on the, table. An unknown number. Maya hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A calm male voice responded. "Maya Carter?" "Yes. My name is Daniel Ruiz. I'm with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." Maya sat up straight. "I saw the broadcast this morning," Ruiz continued. "About your husband." Her throat tightened. "They're lying," she said. "I know," Ruiz replied quietly. There was a pause. "I also saw the number on the receipt you photographed." Maya froze. "You noticed that?" she asked. "Yes," Ruiz said. "And I've seen that number before." Her heart started beating faster. "Where?" "In a federal investigation connected to offshore laundering accounts." The room felt suddenly charged with electricity. Ruiz continued, "If your husband was tracking that account, then what you're holding might be extremely important." Maya looked down at the receipt again. "What happens if Whitmore moves the money?" Ruiz didn't answer. Immediately. When he did, his voice was serious. "Then the trail disappears." "How long?" Another pause. "Not long?" Maya thought of what Lauren said earlier. 72 hours. Ruiz spoke again. "If you have more evidence your husband left behind, we need to find it quickly." Maya closed David's notebook slowly. "I think he hid something," she said. "Something bigger." "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 5:10. Maya looked toward the small framed photograph sitting on the table. David smiling, the kids beside him, 7 years ago. "They're trying to erase you," she whispered. But for the first time since the attack began, Maya wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was starting to understand the battlefield. If you've ever seen someone powerful try to rewrite the truth, then what Maya Carter is about to uncover will leave you stunned. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay with Dignity Voices, because the next step Maya takes could expose a secret powerful enough to bring down an empire. But before Maya can prove anything, Whitmore Global will make their biggest move yet. a $9 billion contract, a deal so massive it will bury every trace of the offshore account forever. And once that contract is signed, the truth about David Carter will disappear for good. The countdown started on national television. The next morning, every major business network carried the same announcement. Behind a polished podium, Edward Whitmore stood smiling beneath the bright lights of a press conference. Whitmore Global is proud to announce the final stage of a historic international partnership, he said smoothly. A large digital screen behind him displayed bold numbers. $9 billion. Defense logistics contract reporters snapped photographs. Investors applauded. Edward continued, "In 72 hours, this agreement will secure thousands of jobs and strengthen global security." Lauren Pierce stood quietly near the stage, watching the room. She wasn't listening to the applause. She was watching the timing, because once that contract was signed, the money pipeline buried inside Whitmore Global would vanish behind layers of international banking law, untouchable. Exactly the word David Carter once wrote in his notebook. Across the city, Maya watched the press conference from the small living room of her apartment. The television light flickered across the walls. She muted the sound. Then she looked down at David's notebook again. The offshore account number circled in ink. Next to it were 2 lines written in his handwriting. Pipeline closes after contract stage. Evidence locked in archive. Maya's pulse quickened. Archive. She flipped through the pages again. There were references everywhere. Dates, transfer paths, company initials. But one entry near the back caught her eye. Failsafe. If accessed. Her heart skipped. David had planned something Whitmore didn't know about. Her phone buzzed. Ruiz. Maya, he said when she answered. You saw the press conference? Yes. That contract is our deadline. How long? 72 hours until signing. But realistically, less. Why? Because once the money starts moving into that contract account, it will disappear through offshore channels before we can freeze it. Maya stared at the notebook. So we need proof before then. Exactly. Ruiz's voice grew more serious. You said your husband mentioned an archive. Yes? Do you know where it is? Maya hesitated. Not exactly. What do you have? Just notes. Send them. Maya took photos of the pages and sent them. There was a long pause on the phone. Then Ruiz spoke again. Maya? Yes? This isn't just accounting. Her stomach tightened. What do you mean? These transfers are tied to government defense contracts. The realization hit her instantly. The money pipeline David discovered wasn't just corporate corruption. It was connected to military supply chains and billions of dollars. Ruiz continued. If your husband archived proof of this, then someone killed him to bury it. The room felt colder. Maya looked at David's photograph on the shelf. I know, she said quietly. Meanwhile, inside Whitmore Global headquarters, the counterattack was already unfolding. Lauren Pierce walked into Edward's office carrying a stack of reports. The smear campaign is holding, she said. Edward didn't look up from his tablet. Public sentiment? 52% now believe the waitress staged the incident. Edward smiled slightly. Excellent. Lauren placed the reports on his desk. But there's still a risk. Edward glanced up. The FBI? Possibly. Edward stood and walked toward the window overlooking Manhattan. That woman doesn't have evidence. Lauren tilted her head slightly. She has something. Edward turned. The receipt. That's not evidence. No, Lauren said calmly. But the number written beside your signature might be. Edward's expression hardened. You told me that number meant nothing. It doesn't, Lauren replied, unless someone connects it. Edward walked back toward his desk. They won't. Lauren studied him carefully. You should move the account sooner. Edward shook his head. That account is part of the contract pipeline. It can't move until the signing. Lauren exhaled quietly. Then we make sure she never gets close to it. Edward nodded. Agreed. He pressed a button on his desk. Send Marcus in. Seconds later, Marcus Vance stepped into the office. Edward spoke calmly. I want eyes on Maya Carter at all times. Marcus nodded. Already done. Edward continued. If she tries to contact journalists, investigators, anyone, Marcus finished the sentence. We stop her. Edward smiled thinly. Good. Lauren added quietly, and prepare the legal file. Marcus looked at her. What file? Lauren's voice remained perfectly calm. The theft accusation. Edward's smile widened. If she gets too close to the truth, Lauren finished the thought, we make her the criminal. That evening, Maya and Ruiz met in a quiet diner several blocks from the FBI field office. Ruiz slid a tablet across the table. These are the offshore transfer routes your husband tracked. Maya studied the screen. Lines of money moving between shell companies, foreign banks, defense contractors. David wrote about an archive, Ruiz said. Yes? If it exists, it could expose everything. Maya leaned back slightly. There's something else. What? He wrote failsafe if accessed. Ruiz frowned. That sounds like a trigger. A trigger? Yes, something that activates if someone touches the account. Maya thought about the receipt again. Whitmore had written the account number without realizing it, and now the account was about to move billions. What happens if that account gets accessed? Maya asked. Ruiz looked at her carefully. Then your husband's failsafe might activate. Maya felt hope flicker for the first time, but Ruiz wasn't finished. There's a problem. What? If Whitmore's people realize we're investigating, they'll destroy the archive before we can reach it. Maya nodded slowly. So we need to move before they do. Ruiz leaned forward. Maya, if you continue this, you could become a target. She didn't hesitate. I already am. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. Maya walked out of the diner into the cool night air. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement. For the first time, she understood the scale of what David had uncovered. This wasn't just about a racist insult. It was about a system worth billions, and a secret powerful people would kill to protect. But Maya didn't notice the black SUV parked across the street. Inside it, Marcus Vance watched her through tinted glass. He lifted a phone to his ear. She's meeting with the FBI, he said. A pause. Then Edward Whitmore's voice answered calmly. Good. Marcus frowned slightly. Good? Yes. Edward's voice carried a quiet edge. Because now we know exactly when to destroy her. Marcus watched Maya walk down the sidewalk. Understood. The pressure started quietly. Then it closed in from every direction. The next morning, Maya noticed the black SUV again. It was parked across the street from her apartment building, the same one she had seen outside the diner the night before. Its engine was off, but someone was inside, watching. She pretended not to notice and walked her children to school like she always did. Normal steps, normal smile, but inside, every nerve was awake. Across the street, the SUV's tinted window lowered just enough for Marcus Vance to see clearly. He spoke calmly into his phone. She's leaving the building. Edward Whitmore's voice answered on the other end. Keep her moving. Marcus nodded. Understood. By afternoon, the online attacks had intensified. Maya sat inside the small public library, using one of the computer terminals Ruiz had suggested for secure research. But even here, the headlines followed her. Waitress accused of stealing corporate data. Whitmore Global considering legal action. A new television segment played behind her. New questions have surfaced regarding Maya Carter's presence inside Whitmore Global offices 7 years ago. Maya's fingers froze over the keyboard. 7 years ago, the anchor continued. Security sources suggest she may have accessed internal financial files belonging to the company. Maya leaned back slowly. That wasn't possible. She had only visited David once at the office years ago. Just once. Ruiz's voice suddenly spoke behind her. You're seeing it too. She turned. Ruiz slid into the chair beside her. They're building the criminal case. Maya shook her head. I never touched their files. I know. Ruiz watched the television. But that won't matter if they create the narrative first. Across the city, Whitmore Global's legal team had already prepared the trap. Inside a private conference room, Lauren Pierce reviewed the strategy with the attorneys. Phase 3, she said calmly. One lawyer nodded. The footage? Release it tonight. Edward Whitmore stood near the window. And the theft accusation? Prepared, the lawyer replied. Lauren turned to Edward. When the footage appears, public opinion will flip. Edward smiled slightly. And the FBI? Lauren didn't hesitate. They won't act without evidence. Edward's voice hardened. Then make sure she looks like the criminal before she finds any. That evening, Maya returned home to find her sister Lena waiting in the apartment. Lena looked worried. You're on every news channel again, Maya sighed. Let me guess. More lies. Lena hesitated. It's worse. She turned on the television. Security footage filled the screen. A grainy hallway camera inside Whitmore. Global headquarters. The timestamp read 7 years ago. Then the footage showed a woman entering the building. The image zoomed in. Maya, walking beside David. The anchor's voice followed. But this newly obtained footage appears to show Maya Carter accessing Whitmore Global offices shortly before her husband's death. Maya stared at the screen in disbelief. That was the day I brought him lunch, the clip continued. Another angle, Maya standing near a desk while David opened his computer. Then the video cut abruptly. The anchor continued. Legal experts say this raises serious questions about whether Maya Carter had access to confidential financial data. The broadcast ended with a headline. Waitress may have stolen corporate files. Lena turned the television off. They're framing you. Maya nodded slowly. Yes. Her phone rang. Ruiz again. You saw it? Yes. They're preparing a warrant. Maya felt her chest tighten. How long? Maybe hours. Lena looked terrified. What do we do? Ruiz answered calmly through the phone. We find the archive before they arrest her. Maya opened David's notebook again. The pages were filled with references to transfers, companies, and coded notes. But one line near the back now stood out more than ever. Archive key stored offline. Offline. Not a server. Not a computer. Something physical. Maya thought hard, then suddenly remembered something David once said years ago. A small safety deposit box at a local credit union. Lena, Maya said quickly, do you still have David's old lockbox key? Lena's eyes widened. You think the archive is there? I think the key to it might be. Lena ran to the bedroom and returned with a small envelope. Inside was the metal key David had kept hidden. Maya grabbed it. We need to move now. Outside the building, the black SUV engine started. Marcus watched Maya and Lena rush toward their car. He spoke into his phone. She's moving. Edward Whitmore answered immediately. Where? Marcus followed their car as it pulled into traffic. I'll know soon. Edward's voice was cold. Make sure she never gets there. Marcus nodded. Already working on it. 20 minutes later, Maya and Lena reached the small credit union building. The lobby was nearly empty. A single teller looked up as they entered. Maya approached the counter. I need access to a safety deposit box. The teller nodded politely. Name? David Carter. The teller typed something into the computer, then frowned slightly. I'm sorry. That box was accessed earlier today. Maya froze. By who? The teller hesitated. A representative with legal authorization. Maya felt the world tilt. Whitmore's team had already gotten there. The archive was gone. Her hands began to tremble. Lena whispered beside her. What do we do now? Maya didn't answer, because she suddenly realized something even worse. If Whitmore's team had taken the archive, then they now had the evidence David left behind, and they would destroy it. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned. 2 Corinthians 4, 8-9. As Maya and Lena walked back outside, police sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. Ruiz called again. His voice was urgent. Maya, listen carefully. They've issued a warrant. For what? Theft of corporate financial data. Maya closed her eyes. They're coming for you. She looked down at the key still in her hand. The key that now opened nothing. For the first time since this started, Maya felt the ground beneath her slipping away. The arrest warrant came just after midnight. Ruiz called Maya the moment he saw it. They filed the charge, he said quietly. Theft of corporate financial data. Maya stood in the dim light of her apartment kitchen, the warrant notification glowing on Ruiz's tablet through their video call. How long do I have? She asked. Ruiz didn't hesitate. Not long. Across the room, Lena sat on the couch holding her head in her hands. The television was still on. Every channel carried the same breaking headline. Whitmore Global files criminal complaint against waitress. Maya watched silently as a news anchor explained the accusation. Corporate attorneys claim Maya Carter illegally accessed confidential financial systems 7 years ago. Newly released security footage appears to support the allegation. Whitmore Global representatives say the company intends to pursue full prosecution. The anchor paused. Legal analysts say the waitress could face serious criminal charges. Maya muted the television. So, that's their move, she said. Ruiz nodded grimly. They flipped the narrative completely. Instead of a billionaire humiliating a waitress, now the story was about a thief. Across Manhattan, inside the glass tower of Whitmore Global headquarters, Edward Whitmore watched the same broadcast with quiet satisfaction. Lauren Pierce stood beside him. The arrest narrative is trending, she reported. Edward lifted a glass of scotch. And the defense contract? Still on schedule, 40 hours until signing. Edward smiled. Perfect. He turned toward the massive windows overlooking the city. Once that contract is finalized, the account pipeline disappears permanently. Lauren nodded. And so will the evidence. Edward took a slow sip of his drink. And Maya Carter will disappear with it. But Whitmore didn't know something had already changed. Inside the FBI Financial Crimes Office, Ruiz stared at a blinking alert on his computer screen. It had appeared only minutes earlier, an automated data trigger. He leaned closer. The alert message read, Archive access event detected. Carter file Ruiz's eyes widened. Wait, he whispered. The system began downloading a stream of encrypted files, account ledgers, transfer records, corporate emails. Ruiz immediately grabbed his phone and called Maya. She answered on the first ring. What happened? She asked. Ruiz's voice carried a sudden urgency. Maya, your husband's archive just activated. What? The failsafe. Maya felt her heart leap. How? Ruiz scrolled rapidly through the files appearing on his screen. The deposit box. What about it? When Whitmore's lawyers accessed it earlier today, it triggered the backup system. Maya stared at him through the video call. You mean, no, David planned that? Yes. Ruiz shook his head in disbelief. He set up a dead man archive. The moment someone touched the physical key location, the digital vault activated. Maya sat down slowly. So, the evidence still exists. Ruiz nodded. More than exists. He turned the screen toward her. Thousands of documents were pouring into the database. Financial transactions, offshore shell companies, internal corporate memos. Ruiz scrolled through one file, then another. Then he stopped. Maya? What? These transfers are connected to government defense contracts. Her stomach tightened. That's what David suspected. Ruiz nodded. But this proves it. For the first time since the nightmare began, Maya felt hope rising. The evidence was real. The truth was finally surfacing. Within hours, Ruiz and a small team of investigators began analyzing the archive. Journalists started receiving anonymous tips about suspicious Whitmore Global transfers. Financial bloggers posted screenshots of offshore accounts tied to the company. The internet exploded again. By morning, the headlines had changed. New questions surround Whitmore Global Financial Network. Leaked documents suggest possible money laundering. Investors began asking questions. Whitmore Global stock dropped another 5%. Inside the executive boardroom, tension filled the air. Edward slammed a newspaper onto the table. Where did these documents come from? Lauren scanned her tablet. They appear to be internal financial files. Edward's eyes narrowed. That's impossible. Lauren looked up slowly. Unless... Edward's voice turned sharp. Unless what? Unless David Carter left something behind. Edward's expression darkened. That man died 7 years ago. Yes, Lauren said calmly, but his data might not have. Edward walked to the window again. The The city below looked calm, normal, but he knew how fast things could collapse. "How bad is it?" he asked. Lauren hesitated. "The documents raise questions." Edward turned. "Questions are manageable." Lauren met his gaze. "These documents could become evidence." Edward's jaw tightened. "Not if we discredit the source." Lauren nodded slowly. "You mean Maya Carter?" Edward smiled again. "Yes." Later that afternoon, Maya and Ruiz watched the news coverage shifting in real time. For the first time, reporters were mentioning David Carter's name with respect. Whistleblower, financial investigator, victim. Maya felt tears sting her eyes. "They're finally listening," she whispered. Ruiz nodded. This could blow Whitmore Global wide open. For a moment it felt like victory, like justice was finally coming. But Ruiz's phone suddenly rang. He stepped away to answer. Maya watched his face change as he listened. When he returned, his expression was grave. "What happened?" she asked. Ruiz spoke slowly. "The Department of Justice just received a complaint." "From who?" "Whitmore Global." Maya's stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint?" Ruiz hesitated. "They're accusing you of stealing those documents." Maya stared at him. "What?" "They claim the files we're analyzing were illegally taken from their corporate system." The room went silent. Ruiz continued. "And they're presenting the security footage as proof." Maya felt the brief moment of hope collapse. "So, now the evidence is contaminated." Ruiz nodded grimly. "Exactly. If the court believes you stole it, they could throw the entire archive out." The trap had closed. Whitmore's final weapon, not destroying the evidence, destroying the credibility of the person who revealed it. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor anything concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. That evening Maya stood alone outside the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions. "Did you steal the documents? Are you facing criminal charges? Did you fabricate the evidence?" Flashbulbs exploded around her. Inside the courthouse, Whitmore's legal team was already filing motions to block the investigation. And now the entire country was watching. Maya Carter had just revealed the truth. But in Whitmore's version of the story, she had also just committed a crime. But Whitmore didn't know the archive contained one final piece. A piece of evidence even his lawyers hadn't seen yet. A message David Carter recorded before he died. And when it surfaces, the entire Whitmore empire will begin to collapse. The courtroom was already full before the hearing began. Reporters crowded the benches. Cameras lined the back wall. Outside, satellite trucks from every major network filled the street. What started as a viral restaurant incident had become something far bigger. Now the question wasn't about a racist receipt. It was about whether Whitmore Global had built a billion-dollar laundering network hidden inside government contracts, and whether the woman accused of exposing it was actually a criminal. Maya sat quietly beside Ruiz at the defense table. Across the room, Whitmore Global's legal team filled 2 full rows. Their lead attorney, Gregory Shaw, stood confidently flipping through a stack of documents. Behind him sat Edward Whitmore, perfectly calm, perfectly composed, as if the entire situation were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. When the judge entered, the courtroom fell silent. "We are here today, regarding allegations surrounding financial documents connected to Whitmore Global," the judge began. Shaw stood immediately. "Your Honor, the matter is straightforward." He gestured toward Maya. "The defendant illegally obtained confidential corporate files and distributed them to federal investigators." He lifted a printed still frame from the security footage. This image shows Ms. Carter inside Whitmore Global headquarters, accessing restricted financial systems. Several reporters leaned forward. Shaw continued. "The documents now being presented as evidence were stolen." He placed the photograph on the evidence table. "Therefore, any investigation based on them must be dismissed." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. If Shaw succeeded, the archive David created would be thrown out. Whitmore Global would walk away untouched. The judge turned toward Ruiz. "Agent Ruiz?" Ruiz stood. "Your Honor, the documents were obtained through an automated archival trigger created by David Carter before his death." Shaw interrupted immediately. "That claim has no proof." Ruiz looked at Maya briefly. Then he said something unexpected. "Actually, we do." The courtroom went silent again. Ruiz turned to the projection screen mounted behind the judge. "Earlier this morning, we completed the decryption of the final portion of David Carter's archive." He nodded to a technician. "Please play the file." The screen flickered. Then a video appeared. The footage looked old. Dim office lighting, a desk, and sitting in front of the camera, David Carter. Maya felt her breath leave her lungs. She hadn't seen his face like this in 7 years. David looked directly into the camera. His voice was calm. "If you're watching this, it means something happened to me." The courtroom became perfectly still. David continued. "I discovered financial transfers inside Whitmore Global that didn't make sense. Numbers appeared on the screen beside him. Account paths, transfer chains. These accounts route billions through offshore shell companies tied to defense contracts." He paused. "I reported the issue internally." David's eyes hardened slightly. 2 days later, I was told to stop asking questions." The video shifted. Emails appeared on the screen. Internal messages between Whitmore executives. Orders to bury the audit. Orders to move money. Orders to destroy files. David spoke again. "I created this archive because I knew the system protecting them was stronger than the truth." The room was silent, except for the sound of the video. "So, I designed a failsafe." He leaned closer to the camera. "If anyone attempts to retrieve or destroy the physical evidence, the archive unlocks automatically." Maya felt tears running down her face. David continued, "And there's one more thing." The video paused. Then the screen changed again. A new file opened. Security footage from Whitmore Global headquarters. But this footage was different from the one the lawyers had shown earlier. This one continued past the moment Maya left. The camera showed Edward Whitmore entering the office minutes later. He walked directly to David's desk, picked up the same financial file, and spoke to someone off camera. "Move the funds tonight." The voice was unmistakable. Whitmore. Gasps filled the courtroom, but the footage kept playing. The next clip showed 2 men following David through the parking garage that same night. Ruiz spoke quietly. These clips were extracted from Whitmore Global's own internal surveillance network. The final video segment appeared. A car pulling out of the parking structure, David inside, another vehicle following behind. The timestamp matched the night of his fatal crash. The courtroom erupted. Reporters began whispering. Lawyers leaned toward each other. Whitmore's calm expression finally cracked. The judge slammed the gavel. Order. But the damage had already been done. Ruiz spoke again. The footage proves 3 things. He raised one finger. David Carter did not steal corporate data. Another. The financial pipeline exists. And finally, and Whitmore executives knew about it. Shaw stood abruptly. This footage is being taken out of context. But the judge cut him off. Sit down, Mr. Shaw. The room fell silent again. The judge looked toward Edward Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, would you like to explain why you appear in the footage ordering financial transfers connected to this investigation? Whitmore didn't answer. For the first time since the trial began, he had no control over the story. At the back of the courtroom, several men in dark suits stood up quietly. Federal agents. They moved toward the Whitmore legal table. One of them spoke calmly. Edward Whitmore, please stand. The billionaire looked at them in disbelief. You're arresting me over a manipulated video? The agent didn't react. We're detaining you pending investigation into financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Flashbulbs exploded around the room. Whitmore's empire was collapsing in real time. Across the courtroom, Maya sat frozen in her chair. Ruiz leaned toward her. He knew this might happen. Ruiz said softly, Your husband. Maya nodded through her tears. He always said the truth had a way of finding daylight. Ruiz smiled slightly. Well, it just did. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be brought to light. Mark 4:22. As federal agents escorted Edward Whitmore toward the courtroom exit, reporters shouted, questions. Cameras flashed. Investors watching the live broadcast saw the moment their empire cracked. But Maya barely noticed. Her eyes were still on the screen where David's final message had ended. 7 years, 7 years of silence, 7 years of waiting, and finally, the truth had spoken. But the collapse of Whitmore Global was only beginning, because the archive contained thousands of files, names of executives, politicians, contract partners, and when investigators opened those files, the scandal would spread far beyond one billionaire. The collapse didn't happen slowly, it happened like a building losing its foundation. Within 48 hours of the courtroom hearing, Whitmore Global's stock dropped nearly 60%. Investors began pulling their money out, government agencies suspended contracts, financial regulators froze several offshore accounts tied to the company's international pipeline. The empire that had taken decades to build began unraveling in days. Federal investigators moved quickly, subpoenas were issued, corporate servers were seized, executives were called in for questioning. The thousands of files contained inside David Carter's archive painted a devastating picture. Shell corporations across 3 continents, hidden payments routed through humanitarian shipping accounts, defense logistics contracts quietly used to move money through offshore tax shelters. The investigation soon widened beyond Whitmore Global. Several partner companies were pulled into the inquiry, and as investigators followed the money trail, the pressure inside Whitmore's executive circle intensified. The first crack came from within. Victor Hale, the company's chief financial officer, agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for immunity. During a closed-door deposition, Hale confirmed what David Carter had discovered years earlier. Whitmore Global had been using its logistics network to quietly move billions of dollars through shell accounts hidden inside international defense contracts. But the most shocking part of Hale's testimony came when investigators asked about David Carter. Hale lowered his eyes before answering. David discovered the pipeline, he said quietly, and Edward Whitmore knew about it. The statement sealed the case. Within weeks, Edward Whitmore faced formal charges including financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. His once celebrated reputation collapsed overnight. The same media outlets that once praised his empire now carried images of him entering a federal courthouse surrounded by reporters. Meanwhile, inside a quiet press conference room across the city, Maya Carter stood before a small group of journalists. There were no flashing spotlights, no corporate banners, just a simple podium and a few cameras. One reporter raised a hand. "Maya, after everything that happened, do you still think about the moment at the restaurant?" Maya paused. For a moment, she could almost hear the laughter again. The table, the receipt, the humiliation. But now the memory felt different. She reached into her bag and slowly unfolded the piece of paper that had started everything. The receipt, the same ink, the same cruel message. "We don't tip black people." Maya held it up gently. "This was the first piece of evidence," she said. The room grew quiet. "Not because of the insult," she continued, "but because arrogance makes powerful people careless." A journalist asked another question. "What do you want people to remember from all of this?" Maya folded the receipt again. She thought of David, of the long nights, of the years spent raising their children while the truth stayed buried. Then she answered softly, "I want people to remember that truth doesn't disappear just because someone powerful tries to bury it." She paused. "It just waits for the right moment to come back. For the Lord loves justice and will not forsake his faithful ones." Psalm 37:28. Months later, new federal regulations were introduced to strengthen protections for financial whistleblowers inside government contract systems. The reform was unofficially known in Washington as the Carter Provision, a quiet legacy, one that ensured future investigators would have stronger protections than David Carter ever did. One evening, Maya walked past the same restaurant where the insult had first happened. The dining room lights glowed warmly through the windows. For a moment, she stood on the sidewalk and looked inside, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Because sometimes the smallest moment, a receipt, a careless word, a forgotten number, can become the thread that pulls an entire system apart. Stories like this resonate with us because they reveal something deeply human about power and character. The antagonist in this story believed that control meant dominance. Edward Whitmore had wealth, influence, lawyers, and public relations teams capable of shaping the narrative of reality itself. In his world, truth was not something to discover. It was something to manage. But the protagonist, Maya Carter, represented a very different form of strength. She didn't fight with power. She fought with patience, discipline, and truth. Her greatest weapon wasn't anger or revenge. It was the courage to endure humiliation long enough for the truth to surface. That contrast between Maya and Whitmore reflects a deeper message. In many moments of life, injustice may seem overwhelming. Systems may appear too powerful to challenge. People may try to silence or erase those who speak the truth. But history repeatedly shows that truth has a unique endurance. Power can delay it. Money can hide it. Fear can suppress it. But truth has a way of finding its moment. This story also invites us to reflect on our own daily lives. How do we treat people when we believe no one is watching? How do we respond when someone without power is humiliated or mistreated? Sometimes the most meaningful acts of justice begin not with grand gestures, but with simple decisions to stand for truth, to show dignity, and to refuse silence when something is wrong. The Bible reminds us that God's justice operates beyond human systems. Even when truth seems buried, God sees what is hidden. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, nor anything concealed that will not be brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. In our everyday lives, that truth encourages us to live with integrity, to speak with kindness, to treat every person with dignity, because the legacy we leave behind is not built by power, but by character. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of truth and dignity, please like, share, and subscribe to Black Resilience Stories. Here, we tell stories about courage, justice, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to let truth disappear. Because sometimes the smallest voice can expose the biggest secret.